It's my feel-good breakfast show.
Welcome back, everybody. This is your Feel Good Breakfast Show. It's time for some health talks on this Tuesday. We've all been there. I feel like you more than anyone else after the last 3 weeks of December. You know, you reach a December holiday period absolutely exhausted from a busy and a productive year. We love that. But how do we counteract this with healthier habits so we can focus on enjoying our next holiday period instead of just recovering and resetting and thinking of resting all the time?
And almost bouncing back. you enjoy the holiday period and then you start counting down the days. You're like, am I going to make it? Will I be okay again to start work? And of course, it's been further intensified with COVID not going anywhere for the moment, as well as juggling life and work. So we decided to get the specialist into the hot seat this morning to share ways in which we can build some resilience against burnout. Let's be preemptive. So please welcome Dr. Etienne van der Walt, or as he likes to be called, just Etienne. Just Etienne, my friend. Doc, great to have you here. Thank you so much for joining us. All the best for the new year ahead of us. You look rested. How are you feeling after your December break? Did you get a break?
I love the couch. It's
It's designed for the perfect get chilled kind of back action.
Thanks, Graham. Thanks, Jamie.
The bottom line is, these last couple of years have taken a lot out of us. I think we've had to almost recalibrate how we handle stress. And Jamie was alluding to the fact that I was separated from my kids for 3 months. Broke me. I had a mental breakdown.
It broke us too.
Yeah, I know. And everyone else, I dragged them down with me. But it was this unbelievable fatigue over the unknown. That was what got to me. There have been so many uncertainties. How is the world right now, in your professional opinion, with the people that are crossing your path?
Yeah.
How are we doing?
Yeah, I think we have to be brutally honest about it, that we are not doing well. I think that's a reality, right? So let's not beat around that bush, Graham. I think the most important thing is that the backdrop within which COVID happened, there's already a backdrop of a stressful situation for the world. So globally, the world is effectively challenged by burnout.
Yeah.
The world has been challenged by that. Even, the World Health Organization defined or actually identified and recognized burnout as a medical syndrome, which is a formal thing now, right? Around the middle of 2019 already.
Wow.
Then we had the pandemic coming our way, which is, I'll just call it almost like a second pandemic, because burnout is the first one, second one is COVID. Now the third pandemic that's following COVID, like really overlapping, of course, is the mental pandemic, which is hitting the world. We knew it's coming. I didn't think it's going to be this quick. It's fast. We have anxiety, huge amounts of anxiety in the world. Addictions are actually really spiraling up. Depression, insomnia is a big feature, right? So globally, we are not well. And of course, the unconscious organism, being you and me and all of us, is really responding to us, I think, in a very sensible way of actually really paying attention to well-being now, paying attention to understanding burnout, understanding everything else that's actually also adding to burnout. We're probably going to talk about the pandemic fatigue a bit later and all kinds of things. They all are actually impacting. And how do we understand this so that we as a global organism can actually come through this and then thrive and continue to thrive as an organism? I believe we will. It's just a question of understanding that, this is actually a reality check. This is where we are. We are not really well at the moment. And how do we actually get out of that and prevent more damage, if you may?
And that's okay. It's okay not to be okay.
For sure.
Yeah.
Let's unpack that right now, because you mentioned it. It's called pandemic fatigue. Is there a difference between burnout and pandemic fatigue?
That's a great question. There's actually a major difference. They're two very different things, and of course impacting on each other. That's the other thing. So let's just think about pandemic fatigue. Pandemic fatigue is probably quite easy to understand. Basically, it says that you and I actually become demotivated to continue to adhere to all these strict measures of lockdown, for example, protective measures and so on. The reason we become demotivated over time is actually quite a fascinating thing, and once again, it's natural. Basically, the brain continuously, unconsciously weigh up what is the bang for the buck, right?
Yeah.
How much effort do I have to put in for the reward I'm getting? And so initially, there was a big threat. Now we see with a big threat, and of course, as you said before, Graham, we didn't know how long it's going to take, but at least we sort of hoped it's going to be fairly quick, right? We all sort of said,
back when we still had hope. Back when we still had hope.
Exactly. And so now you continue to make that kind of calculation in your brain and say, okay, well, the bang for the buck is okay. And then it just becomes relentless. There's 1 year passes, another year comes your way. We don't know what's going to happen. Now we're sitting and we know that at least when everything settles down, we're probably going to have another 6 months or how long that will be. We're still going to actually have to use protective measures. And then the bang for the buck is actually less and less. We also, of course, now see with Omicron in South Africa especially, that we have less of a severity in the hospitals, if you may. So now the bang for the buck even becomes lower, right? And so we start becoming more and more demotivated. That's the pandemic fatigue. What that does is it effectively also says that I'm reducing the energy I assign to the task. Remember that with pandemic fatigue, you actually have to continuously actually assign energy. It's a continuous sort of thing going on in the background.
That RAM that's happening in the back of the brain.
So it's running down energy. Then the next thing is burnout. Well, what is burnout? Well, that's actually quite a fascinating thing. Effectively, burnout is characterized by exhaustion. I'm exhausted. My work is actually going down in terms of performance, and I actually feel distant from my work. I'm distanced, I've got mental distance, or I even feel cynical about the work. I actually detach from my work. So I actually assign less energy because I have to actually look after my energy.
As a survival mechanism.
Yeah, I'm exhausted. And, we can talk about burnout again, I'm sure, because I actually want to explain it in different ways. But you can see that there are actually two things that work differently, but they have an impact on each other.
And at the moment, working beautifully, hand in hand, unfortunately.
Yep.
Now that we know some of those signs, we're going to get into how we can preempt, be aware of what we need to kind of have a red flag assigned to and what we can do about it. Etienne? The doc ain't going nowhere. Please, if you've got any comments or question, any insights, because we've all gone through a period of massive self-reflection through this time, let us know. Let us know on the Expresso Morning Show Facebook page. We'd love to hear from you.
It's my feel-good breakfast show.
Welcome back. You're still live here on your Feel Good Breakfast Show, just in time to continue our conversation with regards to burnout and how to prevent burnout in 2022. Now, Mahatma Gandhi once said, "It is health that is the real wealth and not pieces of gold and silver." We couldn't agree more, which is why we have brought in doctor and neurologist Etienne van der Walt this morning to share his expertise as well as his knowledge when it comes to analyzing human health and behavior and how it is constantly evolving, especially in these crazy times that we're all facing.
Doc, I'm going to ask you to put your neurologist's hat on, or coat, or stethoscope. I don't know what's the
The hammer.
The hammer. The neurologist's hammer. I love that. You obviously have been working with an amazing team at Neurozone. You've been researching ways in which to reduce the risk of burnout, as well as prevent brain-body system implosion, which sounds intense because it is pretty intense. You've been working in this space for 10 years. Tell us a bit about your research and some of the major findings. What have you discovered through this journey?
Yeah, that's quite fascinating. What we've done at Neurozone is we brought in a number of behavioral neuroscientists. So it's and we do a lot of research. So the first at least 7 years of the 10 years, we really just researched this, everything we could find that are behaviors and things we call cognitive states and emotional states. Those are things like optimism, gratitude, or even the way we think and the way we solve problems. And then, of course, the behaviors are the ones we understand well, right? The exercise, the sleep, the nutrition, the mindfulness, and so forth. We took all of those, every behavior we could find, and they were around 65 at the time, and now we have about 87 of those that we studied. We put them all in a pot and really analyzed them and looked at their contributions, relative contributions, right? The way they actually impact and actually contribute to actually give us something called resilience, which is the capacity that overcome the challenges that come our way. Now, that makes sense when we talk about burnout and all the pain. We need that capacity to overcome the challenges continuously. And once we overcome the challenge, we move into a state. Now, I need to quickly say that state is so important. It's called a baseline relaxed physiological state. It's a big word. It's a state of what we call relaxation of calm, where the system is actually relaxed, ready to respond at its best, but also maintaining the system, keeping it well and healthy. Chronic stress, of course, is the opposite. So if you go into burnout and you have chronic stress and you burn out, you effectively are actually out of that. And it means you become ill, you die earlier, but you also have your performance is low, everything is down. And this is why it's so important. And we looked at behaviors and said, we all actually have different behaviors at different times that actually work into this, right? So this is the fantastic thing. So there's the whole dynamic nature to the work we've done. And when COVID struck, we saw that the whole code, we had about 15,000 leaders on the system globally, looked at all the behaviors and knew that there was a very interesting kind of priority for the whole group, if that was like the whole world of leaders, right? When COVID struck, the whole code changed.
Wow.
So while optimism was the number one and reducing negative thought patterns was number two, for example, before COVID, we saw that the number one became exercise diversity, exercise duration, and avoiding destructive habits.
Wow.
And this is not because we say it's important. We also say it's important because unconsciously our system knows that it's important
It
for
was
the world.
necessary, yeah.
It was necessary because that gave you the best bang for your buck to build the resilience so we can actually avoid burnout, avoid and stay well, avoid the mental dysfunction.
Well,
Isn't it
I
quite
love that. It's
fascinating?
like you train a muscle so you can pick up a bigger weight.
That is a beautiful example. I mean, Graham, it is exactly that. You actually grow the muscle, and everything is actually resilient in that sense. There's a whole dynamic nature. You and I dynamically, continuously have to adapt to the changes.
For sure. And you speak about humans, evolving and responding dynamically to these high stressful situations. But what does that mean for the everyday person? Maybe we can think about that as we go into our next discussion. Also, some of the major signs we need to be looking out for so that we do prevent going into burnout for this year.
Excellent.
I want to know how to train my brain. That's what I want to know. We're going to continue this discussion. So interesting, giving you practical ways how you can build resilience so you can handle more stress and you can do the work that you need to do every day and brace for those curveballs, because I have a feeling there are a few more.
It's my feel-good breakfast show.
Welcome back as we continue our focus on mental well-being and building resilience to avoid burnout. Life doesn't get easier or more forgiving. We get stronger and more resilient. This quote leads us into the final conversation we're having with Dr. Etienne van der Walt as we tackle burnout prevention as we head into a brand new year. Because we want it, man. We want to own this year. We want to feel hopeful again. We want to be okay.
And we will be.
We will be. Let's talk about signs that we should look out for before we get to that point of actual burnout.
Yeah. So this is actually a very important point. Very quickly, burnout is not something that happens overnight. It's a whole, there are actually interesting things written about the stages of burnout even. It starts very slowly and actually very subtly and is non-specific. It means that you can't just say this is burnout or signs of burnout, but it's actually a process that slowly just makes you become more and more concerned about your work, working too hard, overwhelmed, I'm sleeping less, I'm spending more time at work, less with my friends, I'm actually paying more attention to the problems I have to overcome, and then I start to become more and more irritable, sleep less, then at some point I start to actually distance myself, a dissociation, I actually become disengaged, is the word that they use, right, in the workplace, or I become cynical. And that's actually very late stages, right? That's when so there's a whole process that takes you there. Getting out of burnout takes a very long time too, even up to a year or more. So it can be very long. This is why we want to prevent this.
Step by step, let's take that first step. What do we, the people, need to do to become more resilient?
So the first thing we need to understand is that no one in this world, this is my statement, you can shoot me down, everybody. Happiness.
Hey, listen, man, you're a neurosurgeon. You can say whatever you want, doc.
Not a rocket scientist. So I believe that no one in this world is resilient enough to make it on their own. Meaning that we are not going to actually make it. The speed of change in the world is too fast, right? Sure. The world changes at the speed of technology. It's too fast. Yeah. And it's actually sped up.
Exponentially sped up, yeah.
And even COVID, the pandemic, even actually sped up even more. So now we've got a huge acceleration, and you and I as individuals cannot stay on it. So we need to collaborate. This is why there's so much written about empathy and collaboration. And, I love the word, the Ubuntu, for example.
Yeah,
that we
find your
really
tribe.
We need to embody that, right? And the idea of that, to actually have a deep sense of belonging, and then, of course, have bonding, deep entrustment. That's for smaller groups, families, teams, size 5 to 8 people. Then you need bonding, entrustment. It's not the same as belonging. There's a sense of belonging, and that gives us a deep social safety. Okay. I think that is actually imperative.
Okay.
The second one is then we need to be able to collectively work together. You need to really work on empathy. That's not, I feel your pain. That's compassion. That's certain empathy. But the type of empathy I'm talking about is, I can think in your shoes. I understand where you're coming from, and therefore I can allow you to change my perspective. So that's extremely...
More reactive, actually.
Exactly.
Get stuck in, okay.
So let's collaboratively then, and then you can actually have the capacity for overcoming challenges together. And we unconsciously, as a world, then solve problems, big problems, and complex problems.
Like
way
coming up
easier.
with a vaccine, for instance.
I rest my
putting out there.
say no more.
Yeah.
So the point being is that we need that. The second thing is, what I would say is really important for everybody to understand, is we need to have more awareness. I mean, Graham, you and I talked about this idea that you are more aware of what's happening in your system so that you could actually take precautionary measures unconsciously. And this idea of mindfulness, therefore, is so important. So we need to be mindful, deeply mindful, and you have to practice mindfulness, which means I have to silence my mind daily. I have to practice deep breathing.
The key word being practice. You've got to do it repetitively.
It is a practice. And we know that science now tells us it's a daily practice. It's somewhere between it's about 15 to 20 minutes per day that I need that. It could be 5 minutes 3 times a day. It could be once a day. I do it in the morning early when I wake up so there's nobody around who can bother me at the time, right? And I'm still awake enough, otherwise I fall asleep at night. So you actually want to practice it early in the morning, for example, deep breathing, focus on nothing, and actually have what we call these non-judgmental thoughts about life and yourself and the application of life. Very important to actually be more self-aware and aware, and then it comes to these predictors we talked about that we've been working on, the behaviors. We know that exercise, movement is so important today. Exercise, diversity, exercise, duration, mobility.
Fluidity.
And then avoid the destructive habits and destructive thoughts. Very important as we've learned from it.
I love what you said, that it's not easy. It's not, burnout doesn't take overnight, and it's obviously the healing and coming to terms with that is also not going to take overnight. So it is a process. It's about practicing something every single day. But you gave us so much tips for this year. Thank you so much for helping us get into the right space, into the right frame of mind, so that we don't and we prevent being burnout for this year. So
Where were you last year? Where were you last year, Doc? Come on,
I was
man.
locking down like everybody else.
Research, man. I was researching. Thank you so much. Some invaluable gems out there. Ultimately, we can be more resilient. We can be stronger, and we can prepare for the stress that's coming our way. That's not going to change, but we can.